this session, which is going to be focused on creating a pro-investment environment in Egypt. I think a number of the panel sessions before this one have actually covered some of the issues, but maybe what we can do with our expert panel here is try to distill that. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle Davis, and I head up the Clean Energy and Sustainability team at Eversheds, which is a law firm, and we've had the pleasure and the honor of working in Egypt for over a year now on the renewable energy projects. I would like to introduce you to this very esteemed panel, all of whom have been very active in the Egyptian market, including on the renewable energy projects. So immediately to my left is Atta Hanora, who is in the Public-Private Partnership Central Unit within the Ministry of Finance, so a very important person for this discussion, Atta. Next to Atta, we have Sharif El Gabali, who is the director of Anara Capital, which is very actively involved in the solar projects that are in the process of being developed at the moment. Next to Sharif is Mari Man Garcia, who is a director of the Clean Energy Business Council. She's also a lawyer and one of my competitors, so I'll try not to be too nice to her. But she's an excellent lawyer. And then next to her is another lawyer, Donya, who many of you will know. Donya is with Shahid Law, who Eversheds have been working closely with for the last year, and is very familiar with what is happening on the ground. So without further ado, let's start. So this session is aimed at focusing on the future. And in particular, I would like us to focus on lessons learned. And because there are challenges in Egypt, and we are in the process of overcoming them. But I want to start off with a question which I think is very important. How important do you think is the alignment and engagement with the local decision makers and people administering the program, in particular at Naria and Egyptera and EETC, for a successful investment environment in Egypt? Because personally, I don't think I've experienced a situation quite like what we've had in Egypt, where we've had Dr. Sobki and Engineer Lamia simply making themselves available, but also working in alignment with each other to ensure that things are joined up. As a developer, would you like to comment on that, Sharif?
Yeah, definitely. I think if we don't have Dr. Sobki and Engineer Lamia championing this program, I think we wouldn't have gone so far as we are today. So it's not only our view on this. I think it's everyone's view. All international developers have severally confirmed the support, the openness, the more learning process we're all moving together with.
Yes.
So this is basically the fact that why we see progress on ground is that we all understand that this program is something new to Egypt, and this is where I see the flexibility from the decision makers have really pushed us so forward today.
Yeah. And Sharif, so it's a very collaborative process that we've enjoyed in Egypt. So having that alignment, having that engagement and collaboration with the key decision makers and those that are administering the program is really important for a continued pro-investment in Egypt. Donya, would you add anything to that, or do you see that as actually being a key factor?
Absolutely. I mean, we're very grateful for this as lawyers, because we have one interface. Basically, we go with the question to either authority, the three of them, and we get the same answer. We get very streamlined opinions, and we're very grateful to the steering committee between the three authorities, because this is something that helps us a lot in the work we're doing for the developers.
And Mary, you're working in a number of other jurisdictions. We were talking earlier, and you're working in, I won't mention the particular country. You, from your experience of working throughout the region, how key is this alignment, and what would be your advice to governments if they are looking to really create a pro-investment environment in terms of the degree of openness and collaboration that they have with the sector they're targeting?
I think it's actually extremely positive what Egypt is doing. It's taking a proactive approach, engaging stakeholders at all levels. So it's engaging not just institutions, but developers, and also the banks, the financiers, which is extremely important in trying to achieve a program that's going to work and to achieve bankable projects. Obviously, we know there are a lot of issues that still need to be addressed, and some of that's outside of their control. In terms of the region generally, I think it's a very innovative approach. I come from, many moons ago, before I came here to the Middle East in 2001, I used to work in Brussels. So when I worked there for the EU, there was a lot of consultation, a lot of lobbying, and a lot of interaction. And I think it's fantastic to see that Egypt is really getting involved with the private sector, listening to concerns and trying to develop a model that really works. And to be honest, you just don't see that level of engagement across the region. I'm not saying that the models don't work. They do. They close projects, they bank projects. But perhaps there's a little bit of complacency there because they do that. And in the current environment, I do think it's extremely beneficial to have that level of engagement and really to listen to the concerns of the private sector, to listen to the concerns of developers and of the financiers.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful. Can I focus now on two key areas which, if there is going to be continued investment in the Egyptian clean energy opportunity, we need to discuss. And the first is capacity. And where is the additional capacity going to come from, and is there an appetite for that in Egypt at the moment? And I wish Dr. Sobki was on my panel, because he would be able to confirm that. And then the second is, and this is, I guess this is mentioned on every panel, currency liquidity. Because we're fortunate with this first round of feed-in tariffs that the DFIs have participated. But as we move forward into other opportunities, currency liquidity is always going to be there as a key concern. And we know that Egypt is doing all that it can to resolve this problem. But I think that they're the two issues I'd like to deal with. And maybe if we could start actually with the currency liquidity point and get your view on what can be done, is there anything that this sector can be doing to be of assistance?
If you would allow me, I just want to comment on your first question, which is the involvement of the stakeholders.
Yes.
Actually, I'd like to mention that what's going on in the feed-in tariff and the NAREA, Dr. Sobki and Engineer Lamia and their colleagues, actually they succeeded to gain the trust of the banks and of the developers, which is something I believe it's new to the market,
yes.
To the Egyptian market especially, and involving the private sector, the developers and the banks in drafting the contracts that will be managing the relation for the next 25 years is something very important. Usually we do this in the PPPs and the BOTs and stuff like this. They adopted that in a very efficient way.
Exactly.
So they had all the trust from the market, from the developers, and actually this was another marketing tool to make this kind of queues that we're seeing. This is a real success of the program. Regarding
Actually, that's why I mentioned it.
Yes,
that is why I mentioned it, because I think there were a number of times when things could have come off the rails, and it was largely down to the skill and the the relationship that Dr. Sobki and Engineer Lamia had built up, that it stayed on track.
I want to add, from the other side, you're seeing what's going on from the stage, from the investors and developers and the bank side. From the government to government side, this is another success story that maybe it's not available, it's not exposed to everybody. Dr. Sobki and his team and Dr. Shaker succeeded to involve all the stakeholders within the government to work on the same methodology and the same pace with them. So that's made the involved Ministry of Investment, Ministry of Financing, the PPP unit, and all other stakeholders to come and align with their methodology and their pace. And actually, we're gathering all these kind of experiences to one slot to come out with this successful. Hopefully, it would close.
Now, Atta, I'm not going to let you off the hook now.
Now
Currency liquidity.
they say liquidity. The problem that we're facing now with the feed-in tariff is not basically the exchange rate, because the exchange rate, the big chunk of it is covered through the methodology of paying the exact the exchange rate in Egyptian pounds. The problem would be in the availability of the hard currency to pay back the debts or to pay back the dividends. Let's go back 10 years back and see within the last 10 years what happened, just to gain the experience and to the history of that. Within the last 10 years or 12 years, we faced two crises as we're currently facing. And it took Egypt something between 1.5 to 2 years to recover and to put things back to normal. That was in the 2007, 2008 in the crisis, and that again was 2002, 2001, something like this. So this means that this kind of problems normally solved in 1.5 years to 2 years. Let's go back to our feed-in tariff. The problem that we'll be facing the people or the developers is when they start paying back their debts. And they will never be paying back their debts before 2.5 years from today.
Yeah.
Financial closure will take something like 6 months. Development and construction will take something like 1.5 years or so. So you're from 2.5 to 2 years from today, actually they will start seeing looking for the dollars, looking for the hard currency to start paying their debts. And 3 or 4 years over the line, they will be needing some money, more dollars for the dividends.
But Atta, can I just interrupt you there? But I don't think that Dr. Sobki and others within the government, that their plan is that we wait until those projects are operational and the debt is being repaid. So there is going to be a further pipeline of projects within that period. So,
Yes.
So how do we get people comfortable?
Look, number one, the government, as you just mentioned, the government, since the last, let me say seriously, in the last 2 months, are taking all measures to avail this kind of hard currency and doing some kind of priorities, especially for the development or developing project. One of which on the top priority is the energy in general and the solar energy in particular.
Yeah.
And this is on the agenda of the priorities of the Central Bank of Egypt. And this was discussed with the Minister of Financing and the Minister of Power and Electricity, with Mr. Amir, the Central Bank of Egypt, and at the Prime Minister level. And this was said that the energy in general, solar energy, will have some kind of priority. And actually, I know that Dr. Shaker is negotiating with the Central Bank of Egypt to avail something like $600 million for this kind of projects on the short term. But I'm talking in general,
Yeah.
not only for the feed-in tariff or for the energy projects. I'm talking about the projects in general, because this problem is also facing our business, which is the PPP business, in
Yes.
different sectors like water and
Absolutely,
desalination, all that.
yeah.
So it's the same problem.
Exactly.
However, the energy was lucky enough to be on the top of the priorities, but we're trying to be just next to them.
Yes.
What I'm trying to say is this kind of problem
Yes.
will never last too long.
No.
They started seriously. Actually, they started a few months ago.
Yes, I
but
know.
as we can see from the other side, they started seriously in the last 2 months.
Yes.
And everybody is working in Egypt can see that the queues or the period to queue at the central bank to find their LCs open or something is not now shortened from 3 to 4 months. Now it's almost 1 to 2 months.
Yes.
So this is a good sign for this kind of development. I don't say that this will disappear within the next few months. It will take the time. It will take something like 1.5 years at least, because this is the history and this is the role of this kind of let me say, reform of the sector, given that we are not only Egypt, that the globe is facing some kind of crisis, or a financial crisis. So this actually will affect everything. But I can see now that the government seriously, in the last 2 months only, is seriously working, taking all measures to solve this problem. So I think the problem will be solved, or at least partially solved, within the next year or year and a half.
Yes.
But let's say, if worse come to worse, and it's extended more than 2 years, the only risk that the developers will be taking is not the inavailability of dollars. It's not inavailability of dollars, it's shortage of dollars. And there's a big difference between inavailability and shortage. Shortage here is reflected in queuing for a few months, 2 months or 3 months, the latest, to get their requests for exchanging or repatriating their dollars or the dividends or the payments to the banks. So this is the risk, and actually this could be calculated or factored in the price. The feed-in tariff that we have now, actually we participated as the Ministry of Finance and the PP Central Unit, we participated in the financial model and the pricing of this, and we admit, as most of your people here are admitting, that this is a very generous feed-in tariff.
Absolutely.
And we took measures of risks, and we exaggerated in this kind of risks. Okay, so it's covering all the risk premiums, plus a cushion for extra risks if they want, and this was meant intentionally to attract people and make them much more comfortable. And once they come into ground and practice this kind of risks, I know that in the next round, the risks premium will be much more or less, because they practice that and they know now that this kind of risks is not priced as we exaggerated in pricing, and things will be back to normal. And that's why we agreed together that with Dr. Sobke, that first in, first served, who will finish the financial closure earlier, will have the opportunity to get into this and sign the contract and start working before the 28th of October to enjoy this kind of tariff.
Yes, thank you, Atta. So I guess, what you're saying is investors and developers need to analyze the risk profile of Egypt as a whole, and they have to take a view. And in fact, with all the new markets that are emerging around the world, that is exactly what our clients are doing. They are having to look at the risk profile of that country and decide whether they have confidence that some of the challenges will be resolved if they're not able to secure cover in one way or another. The key challenge, I appreciate what you're saying about the feed-in tariff being high. I think that covers the equity side, because the developers can decide whether or not they take that risk. The challenge always is, will the banks take that risk? And fortunately, in the case of Egypt, the banks have rallied round and are participating. But Sharif, going forward, and this is sort of slightly off-piste, but I want to get your view on this. Going forward in the next sort of 12 to 18 months before these projects become operational. So hopefully they're operational, the debt is being repaid, the equity is being repaid, everybody's happy. I think then we're in a completely different environment. But up until then, do you see more Egyptian companies participating in the market? Because of course they can approach things slightly differently. They will have learnt an awful lot from the partnerships that they, including you in particular, have entered into with international developers. Do you think that they will take more of a lead role now going forward? And then Atta, I will come to you ladies in a moment. I want to ask you, Atta, if that's the case, how do the Egyptian banks fit into this? Because we are running a training program with the IFC for the banks in Egypt that's coming up shortly. But obviously a key factor connected to that is the cost of finance with the Egyptian banks because of the interest rates. So can I put the first question to you, Sharif? And if that's the case, where is the financing going to come from, Atta? And how do the Egyptian banks fund competitively, particularly if the next round of projects is as competitive as I'm sure the government is hoping it will be?
Yeah, there are many elements in your question. So basically, this is everyone's first experience in Egypt, even international developers, even stakeholders, even banks, even governments. So, I mean, in the next 6 to 8 months, seeing other players in the market, I'm not sure, especially with this tight program that, technically, practically on ground, everyone should reach financial close by June, if everything is moving on pace. However, this gap of financing, I see this solved not only from Egyptian investors. I see it solved from Asian investors, for instance. I see a lot of money coming from China, especially. What you see in global markets, China needs different growth strategies. They need to have investments outside of China. A learning curve again. We as local developers, international developers, understanding more of the market, building more confidence in the market.
Absolutely.
Witnessing the growth rates we used to see before the revolution. And it's all interrelated. Definitely, yes, you can see more different schemes, money. And there are some fundamental structures, like, commercial banks, local banks cannot finance this program, technically, according to their regulations. So, according to their regulations, if your proceeds are not in dollars or in hard currency,
No, I understand.
we cannot finance.
But my question, Sharif, is and this might be too soon in the next year to 18 months, but do you see, there are various EPC, construction companies in Egypt partnering,
Exactly.
do you see the possibility within that short time frame, or will it take longer for there to be pure Egyptian projects where you have an Egyptian developer and an Egyptian EPC funded through the Egyptian banks? Is that too soon? Because I think that's got to be an intention of the
We would see more on the refinancing of these assets afterwards, I believe. However, at this stage, I'm not sure, and I'm also not sure even that. If we have been speaking about the financing, okay, but I believe there is also an equity gap. We will start witnessing moving forward.
Okay.
So this is also some alarming elements in this program, is that, we've been only speaking about financing. DFIs are taking the lead. They'll build the confidence. But then let's see what kind of, I myself, I'm involved with some boutique investment banks and other investment houses. Now they're starting, roadshows for the program to start raising,
Can I stop you there, though, Sharif? I'm going to come on to you, Atta, on the banking bit. You said you think there's an equity gap.
There will be an equity gap.
Okay. Because there's huge interest on the equity side at the moment. I've had emails this week from major global equity funds asking if we can do some calls to talk about the opportunity.
Yeah, this is contradicting to what I just said. But when I say equity gap, I see, again, because it's a timed program. So these equity funds to start studying, doing their on refinancing, I don't think there will be any kind of.
I'm not talking about the current feed-in tariff projects. I'm talking about beyond the current feed-in tariff projects.
Yeah, no, I'm just answering the 6 to 12 month. So that's what I was answering.
Okay.
Yeah, beyond that, definitely there will be. Again, it's more of a penguin effect.
Okay.
You see one developer stepping in, one investor stepping in. You see others investors. So it's going to be more like a snowball effect. In other words, yeah.
Let me come to Atta, though. Local banks' participation. I appreciate that there is the current, I think, central bank restriction on them lending in any currency other than Egyptian pounds. Do you see them getting engaged? And if so, when? And what needs to be done to help that happen?
Actually, this is a monetary policy that only the Central Bank of Egypt can talk about it. But the regulation of the Central Bank is that the Egyptian banks cannot lend in hard currency unless the revenue is coming in a hard currency, just to secure the flow, the cash flow. I believe that in this kind of business, like the long-term contracts, I say, like the feed-in tariffs or the BOOs or the BOTs or all this kind of PP projects, there is always a local component that they can heavily participate in. And I believe, maybe the developer can correct me if I'm wrong, that in the expansion of this kind of solar energy and wind energy, there will be some kind of local manufacturing for the panels or for the blades of the wind turbines or something like this, which will increase the local component one day after the other. So maybe in the second wave or the third wave, you can find much more local component, unless the regulation of the central bank changes.
Okay. Thank you, Atta. I want to sort of come sort of slightly wider now and come back to Mari, if you don't mind, Mari, and look at some of the things that are happening in the global energy markets, in particular where the oil price is, the predictions for where it's going to end up, including the gas discovery in Egypt. And what do you think that all means for Egypt as a pro-investment environment?
Oh, a lot. I mean, obviously, it presents both challenges and opportunities. You just need to turn the news on, and it's full of negativity. So I don't want to go into sort of all of the challenges. But
Can you move your mic closer to you, please? Yeah.
I don't want to go into all of the challenges. Obviously, we can all see that if we turn on the news. But in terms of opportunities, we've heard this morning, and everyone's aware of the subsidies that are paid for conventional power and fuel. And I think the low oil price obviously presents a clear opportunity to just ramp up the phase out of those subsidies. And obviously in turn that then has, fiscal benefits, and some of those benefits could hopefully be channeled into renewables. In terms of some of the challenges, clearly, we're sitting here in Abu Dhabi today, and the GCC are huge investors into Egypt. And so potentially there is a risk there that some of those investments could slow down or be reduced as a result of the low oil price, because obviously, people are looking at budgets, and the low oil price impacts particularly, GCC countries and their overseas investments as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, you can ask questions on these pads. I have one. Fantastic. Anonymous. How much funding is currently available to finance the ongoing projects, and how does Egypt foresee to fulfill... I'm very sorry, I think you might have to redraft that, because I can't quite understand the question that you're asking. But apart from part of it, do you think that the Egyptian government will take equity I think that was part of the question, equity in the projects that are getting developed? Now, I know that on some of the direct agreements, that is something, and I think the Masdar direct agreement with the government is publicly known, and we're on a 2,000 megawatts of direct agreements where you will be participating on an equity basis. Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Sobki, for answering that question. I would like to pick up, in terms of creating a pro-investment environment, what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 months, Donia, is that there has been a hive of activity with certain participants being unable to fund the construction equity and new investors coming in to plug that gap. And one of the key challenges that's been faced are the understandable restrictions that are placed on changes to the lead developer role and changes to the composition of the 51% ownership structure. In the maturer markets, there are different stages for different types of capital to participate. So if I look at my own home market, the UK, There are those that provide the development capital, and they're very expert at that, and then they exit pre-construction, so they exit on financial close, and then you have a new usually an infra fund capital coming in and funding the construction, and then after a certain period of operation, you have the institutional capital coming in, and that's a sort of well tried and tested model. And many of the participants in the Egypt program sort of wanted to try and make Egypt fit within that trajectory, and that has proved quite difficult. And I understand the reasons why the government has imposed those restrictions, particularly for the first major capacity. Donia, do you think that needs to be changed going forward as the market matures? And don't look at Dr. Sobki. Don't worry that he's sat there listening to what you say.
Yes, I do think so, because as you said, in most markets, the model is a little bit different. It's, I mean, people have the opportunity to come in at financial close, as you're saying, not like we now have in Egypt at commercial operation date. So, I mean, everybody sitting here, I believe, and all the developers do understand that the government tried to put these restrictions in order to make sure that the projects take place. And this is very important because it's the first major project of this size for Egypt, and it's understandable that the government needed to build trust in the project and in the feed-in tariff scheme as such. But of course, as you're saying, as the trust is there and becomes there, and as there would be many projects, feed-in tariff and others, I don't think that these rules would be needed anymore. And so perhaps a shift to more internationally accepted models to finance these projects would be very opportune.
Thank you, Donia. I agree with what you just said. So I think our time is up, but I will open it to the audience if anybody does have any questions to raise by hand. No? If not, then we will finish on time. I would just like to summarize. Sorry, did anyone want to say something? Oh, somebody has a question. I'm sorry. Could you say who you are and where you're from, please?
We can hardly hear.
We can't hear. Is there a microphone? Thank you.
I understand one of the problems with Egyptian banks financing projects is they have very high interest rates due to the high inflation rates in Egypt. So they can't do long-term tenors because it's kind of prohibitive for the developers. Are there any solutions people are looking at around some kind of perm structure?
Yeah, so actually that gets us back to Michelle's last question, is like, you know, so across the project life cycle, you know, there are different risks. And this is why there's a developer, there's an infrastructure fund, so, and then there's a mutual fund, a trust fund. So basically, this is where we believe is that that's why I'm saying it's going to be much easier refinancing these projects when they're real assets on ground from institutional funds and infrastructure funds than financing the development today as we speak. It's really tight, and commercial banks are not playing a very active role. However, there might be, because this is a very ambitious program, and for instance, a site like Bimban is supposed to be the biggest solar park in the world, and a site like El Minya might be even much, much bigger. So I believe there is political will, and there should be national banks championing, standing up, maybe partnering through platforms like development agencies to learn, to understand. And as we were saying in the last panel, like, you know, the model of South Africa, having tighter contracts, having more structured contracts, so you find more local banks involved. Even in India, I mean, even India today, the market now, you see more local developers, you see more local banks involved. Definitely DFIs will always be there. DFIs shall be leading the process. But I think it must come from a political will rather than from a commercial perspective as we speak today. It has to be, and we're speaking, for instance, with the National Bank of Egypt. Hopefully we might get them involved through a platform with China. but this needs, the program is very tight, and this needs a lot of preparation.
I agree.
So,
I think
so hopefully we pick up either the BOO projects or the second round of tariff. There would be other projects, but today, as we speak, no, DFIs, they are the only financiers. Yeah.
Atta, did you? No, no. I think that's correct, and I think the market will find innovative solutions as well. Donia.
Yeah, I just not talking about markets, but since we're talking about pro-investment environment, I think while preparing for this, I found some numbers that I think would be interesting to hear. I think a lot of the developers were a bit worried about the parliament and what the parliament would do when they are in place, and what would happen, whether they would approve and pass all these laws related to electricity and renewable energy. And I would like to just pick on something that Dr. Subki said this morning in his opening speech. The law on renewable energy was passed with a sweeping result, basically 399 approved, while 6 only rejected and 2 abstentions. Electricity law was passed, 258 members approved, 58 only rejected and 6 abstention. Amendments to the investment law was passed, law on the pledge of movables was passed, and even the appeal to contracts, state contracts was passed. So I believe this is a very good sign that the parliament, which is now in place, is also encouraging investments in Egypt.
Thank you, Donia. Any other questions before I close? I don't think that there are any. So was there one?
On
the tablet.
Oh, on here. Okay, sorry. Right. Even a generous feed-in tariff is not enough if the commitment to it is not clear. Which of the projects will get the communicated tariff? What if more than 2 gigawatts of PV projects would reach financial close by October 2016? Well, we've answered that question. It's first past the post. So if you have a project now, you need to get your skates on. What tariff will apply to projects that fail to reach financial close by October 2016? Zero.
No, it's not zero. Actually, it's the after this 2,000 megawatts passes, or the lapse of the 2 years, there will be another feed-in tariff, which the Ministry of
so you can go for it. Yes.
is working on now, and we're working with them on
Yes.
it. So it will be announced on due time when there is another
Yes.
capacity
Yes.
is required and the lands are available. So when the government and the Ministry of Electricity decide that this is the new wave,
Yes.
it will be announced with a new feed-in tariff for a
Yes.
period of time, which is 2 years as well.
Yes.
So it's the same.
It's zero under the current feed-in tariff, but you would then go in as in any other country.
And I
you'd
believe,
go into the next one.
please, Dr. Sobki, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the qualified bidders who are reaching their financial closure after the 28th of October date, they will be entitled for the next, to be the first to sign, actually, on the second wave,
great.
but with the new feed-in tariff. So
Fantastic.
all their efforts will not be left alone or just dropped.
Fantastic. Well, that's fantastic. And which of the projects will get the communicated tariff? Well, there's an awful lot of movement at the moment. We're not entirely sure, but it's looking enormously positive, I would say. I think we've got a pretty good sense of which ones are
But
happening.
I just want to have a comment on this question. It started with the generous feed-in tariff is not enough while the government is not committed. I actually against this word. What is the Egyptian government doing to show that they are not committed?
Yes.
And I leave the developers and the banks to answer this.
Okay. I'll just check there aren't any more. I'm going to wrap it up because I know that the organisers want us to get going. So I just want to summarise. We've been looking at, how do you create a pro-investment environment? Key for Egypt has been and will continue to be engagement and collaboration with the key government decision makers and those administering the programme, and alignment between them as well, communication. Not just with the developers and the investors, but also internally with other key government stakeholders. So that has been done very effectively, and we have no reason to believe it will not continue in the future. Currency liquidity is there right at the top. We know that. And I think the message that is coming across is developers and investors need to take a view on Egypt. This is not just renewables. You need to take a view on Egypt and look to seek whatever protections are available in the market. And there are some currency liquidity guarantees that you can get that protect you against the position not getting worse, etc. Capacity is clearly important, and we didn't come on to this, but I know that the Egyptian government has significant plans for the renewable energy program, direct agreements, BOOs, and indeed projects in connection with the Suez Canal development. So there is capacity. This is a market that provides you with further potential investment opportunities. Donya mentioned the change to ownership restrictions, and going forward, as the market matures, that is probably something that those with significant capital to aggregate, which is what we always talked about happening in Egypt, will probably need to see in order to keep that capital being recycled. And then, as Mari correctly pointed out, we can't look at Egypt in isolation of what is happening elsewhere in the world, and we do need to view the investment opportunity in the environment in the context of the wider global investment environment, and clearly the oil price may or may not be impactful, and I know that there are differing views amongst various panelists on what that will be. So I think, broadly speaking, what has been happening in Egypt has been successful. There is significant interest. It is one of the success stories of the region, and long may it continue. And may I ask you now to join me in thanking our esteemed and expert panel for contributing today. Thank you.